to the Quiet Corner podcast. This is a knitting, hand spinning, and rigid heddle weaving podcast where I, Vanessa, talk about my love for all things fiber from my little corner of the world in Ottawa, Canada. If you are a new or returning viewer, you are most welcome here. And if you would like to join me, let's grab a cup of something comforting. I've got some tea here with me, of course, in a newly thrifted mug, actually, that my husband just found this morning when we went thrifting together. So that's very exciting. So grab a cup of something comforting and let's slow down and stitch together. I also just wanted to say to stay tuned toward the end of this podcast, because I am planning to do a little giveaway, so the details about that will come toward the end. In the past, when I was podcasting, would have been about 5 years ago now, I used to post about once a month. That was the rhythm that was working for me at that point. I'm not really sure what's going to work best for me this time around. We'll just have to see, but I did want to take some time to record a little earlier than I typically would, just because there's a lot coming up for us in the months of May and June. So I was so touched by the warm welcome back and seeing some of the viewers who had joined me many years ago on this channel, and just seeing all of your sweet comments and getting the opportunity to kind of reconnect with you. And it's just been really sweet. So thank you so much. So I think plan for today will be, I will talk about, I have one finished object I can share with you. We can talk about progress, or have a look at my works in progress, and one new cast on, which I'm knitting on right now, and I'll tell you a bit more about soon. And then we can get into, I think, a little bit more about my my next endeavor, which is kind of getting a bit more serious about natural dyeing for yarn and fiber. I toyed around with it in the past, but not in a very concerted way. So I thought we could talk about that, because I do have several acquisitions to go along with that new adventure, and I would love to have you join me on that journey, and I'm sure I'll be talking about it a lot on this podcast. So I thought we could talk about kind of my plans around natural dyeing and latest acquisitions to go along with that, as well as kind of some plans that I have for future knitting projects, including hopefully with naturally dyed yarn if I am successful in my newest endeavor. So I think that will be the plan today. And maybe before we get started on that, I could just tell you what I'm wearing. I have two of these super cropped little crop tops that I knit quite a few years ago now, like at least 5 years ago, with some hand-dyed yarn that was gifted to me, and I unfortunately cannot recall who the dyer was. It was so long ago now, and I've lost the tags for the yarn, but it was a Canadian indie dyer, I think from the West Coast. I know that's not gonna like narrow it down at all, but yeah, they are, it's just a super simple, it was a really quick kind of summer knit that I cast on, and I have another one identical to this, just with a different yarn. And this is actually, funny enough, I used the Love Note, I think it's called the Love Note sweater, or the Love Note top by Tin Can Knits. I can't quite recall like the exact name, but I used the pattern just without the lace for this top, and because I still really liked the shape of it, and I just wanted to knit like a basic crop top. So if you're wondering what the pattern is, it's technically the Love Note without the lace. Yeah, and yeah, it's just it's kind of nice to have some tops like this that can really easily go over a summer dress, I find. And I am hoping to expand my summer knits wardrobe eventually, but lately I've been more focused on my warmer weather, or sorry, cooler weather knits, just because I lost so many garments, as I mentioned in the last podcast, to the silverfish attack. And thank you all for your sympathies around that. Yeah, so I'm just trying to kind of build the wardrobe back up. Okay, so let's talk about finished objects. I just have the one. This is the hand spun cowl that you would have seen on the previous episode, and I cast this off. It was a very quick knit and very easy to work on. You know, it's a worsted weight hand spun on, I think I used fairly large needles. They might have been my US 8, I think, 7 or 8. So yeah, knit up pretty quickly. And it turned out exactly how I'd hoped. Like I said, this was the sheep fleece that I processed myself. It was my first experience of processing a raw fleece, doing all of the scouring of the wool, and then hand carding it, hand spinning it, and knitting it up. And I just wanted the natural wool to shine on its own, undyed, in a very plain stockinette, because I just think that plain stockinette shows off so much texture and character in a yarn, in a hand spun yarn especially, I think. And so this is my finished object. I'll also give it a try on here for you, just so you can get a sense for what what she's looking like. But yeah, it's exactly the fit that I was hoping for. I did do a stretchy cast on, and then I just bound off with extra large needles. I didn't figure that the cast off or on edge needed to look like anything in particular, because the whole point with this pattern is that you get a natural curl, a natural roll, because it's just straight stockinette with no ribbing to straighten it out. So those cast on and cast off edges you don't see them. But yeah, they have a lot of stretch, so it's easy to go on. And what else did I want to say about this? Oh yeah, I wanted a pattern that I could just use up the whole amount of handspun that I had. And this was perfect because I could just keep knitting the tube until I ran out of yarn. And that's pretty much what I did. I think I only had like a couple of grams left after I cast off. And it's the perfect length too, because I wanted it to just kind of be bunched up for like the really cold days here in Ottawa. In the winter, it's not uncommon to have -30 Celsius days, and with the wind chill, we can go up to -40 with the wind chill. I don't think in recent memory we've had it anything colder than that with the wind chill. I could be wrong. Anyhow, what I love to have on those days especially is something that can go like right up to my eyes. So, you know, this is like the perfect thing because there's still lots of airflow. It's not like having something I can't breathe through. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with this, and I'm looking forward to having it for next winter. So that was my handspun cowl. And that is my only finished object that I have to show you today. Okay, works in progress. Let's see here. I'm gonna have to get this basket down here. So I'll start with the ones that I had introduced on the last podcast, and then we'll talk about my new little cast on. Okay. I'll show you progress on my Maple Meadow cardigan by Mippy the Label. And I've got it in this lovely little project bag, which Dan actually got me for my birthday several years ago now from a local shop here in Ottawa called, I think it's Bogey and Birdie is how you pronounce it. And I think that the original intention for this bag was to be a makeup bag, I think. And I unfortunately, I don't know the maker or the brand. Maybe it's on here. Danica Studio. It's a 100% cotton exterior with like this adorable embroidery on it. So that's what my Maple Meadow is living in right now. Not a ton of progress on Mabel. I can show you the back. I'm not sure if the lighting will be conducive to seeing all the texture and the lace in this cardigan. I did notice that on the last episode, it's showing up as a much cooler, like purple on camera, but in real life, it's a much warmer burgundy. So that's just to note that, you know, it's not showing up quite as it is in real life. This is the progress. That little stitch marker is showing where I was last time I showed you. So it only grew by a couple of inches. I'm hoping to, I've got kind of a plan to try to tackle around 8 rows per week. And I kind of calculated that out and figured out that gives me like a couple of inches per week. I think that would be like a good pace. This is a focus project. I can't typically TV knit with this, or even like listen to a podcast or an audiobook with it. I'm typically, especially for the right side rows, I'm definitely needing to focus. So it's a focus project that's going to grow slowly, and I knew that when I cast it on. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this is knitting up, and also how it's fitting when I try it on. I think it's so far it's looking like it's going to be just the right fit. So that's where I'm at with the Mabel Meadow. And next, I think I will show you my Felix cardigan. Now this one is growing much faster. And I've had the opportunity to try this on as well, because I was able to get through the yoke and cast on stitches for the underarm and start knitting the body. And I also am really pleased with how this is fitting. So, not sure if you can see a whole lot there, but this is what the shoulder detail is looking like with this beautiful lace pattern that goes down the raglan, increases on each arm. And it is, it's interesting because I think it calls for doing about 10 inches after the underarm for the size that I'm knitting before you start the ribbing. And I'm less than 10, but I think I'm getting pretty close. Like I'm probably an inch away from where I need to start the ribbing to get the length of cardigan that I'm hoping for. Because I really like when a cardigan kind of falls like right at the belly button area. I just find that is a great fit for a lot of my outfits. Like if I'm wearing higher waisted jeans or just like a flowy dress or any kind of dress really, even like work pants seem to work with that length for me. So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm aiming for. Not like a short crop, not like a long sweater, but like somewhere in between. And so we're almost there and almost ready to start the ribbing on the body for this. And I'm super excited about it. And it's feeling very, very comfy and cozy. It's also been really easy to knit on, you know, while Dan and I are watching a show in the evening, or I'm listening to an audiobook or watching a knitting podcast. It's good mindless knitting. And I really don't mind purling. I've also taught myself to flick when I knit. I don't know if that term is familiar to you, but like instead of wrapping the yarn, I am flicking, like I hold it over my finger and I just kind of, this isn't going to be a very good demo, flick it over the needle instead of wrapping. And since teaching myself, learning off of YouTube to flick, I'm a much faster knitter now, but I've also found that it makes purling a breeze compared to wrapping. So anyhow, I don't mind purling. I know a lot of folks don't enjoy it so much. It's definitely not as enjoyable as the knit stitch for sure, and just knitting plain stockinette. But I would highly recommend, projects like cardigans if you want to kind of get into a better rhythm with purling. I actually find that the more projects I do like this that involve more purling, the more that purling just feels natural to me, and I can, similar to knitting like plain stockinette, I can, depending on the yarn, I can purl without looking. So if I'm needing to focus on something else while I'm doing it, I can. Though I do find it a little bit trickier when I'm holding mohair double, because it's easier to get split stitches between the mohair and the main strand of yarn that you're holding. So I do have to be a bit careful with not looking, or at least checking, because I noticed actually with this project that many rows down I had split stitches between the mohair, and you could see the mohair thread being carried over to other stitches that it wasn't supposed to be attached to. And I thought about leaving it, but every time I would knit and get around to that part and I would see it several rows down, I was like, no, I think it is gonna bother me. So I decided to drop down with a crochet hook and re-pick up the stitches for the 2 rows where I had that split stitch issue, and fixed it that way. So I didn't have to rip back. I was able to do it by dropping down and picking the stitches back up with a crochet hook, which is another skill that is, I think, worth its weight in gold. I'm really glad that I learned how to do it ages ago, because I'm one of those people who will avoid ripping back at all costs. I just can't stand, losing the progress. So being able to drop down on just one row without ripping back and fixing either knit stitches or purl stitches with a crochet hook allows you to fix a mistake many rows down without needing to rip out all of those rows. It's just search for videos on YouTube on how to do it. I'm not exactly sure what the if there's a specific name for that technique, but it's one of the techniques for fixing knitting mistakes. So if you look up how to fix knitting mistakes, I'm sure it would come up. Anyway, So that has saved me many, many times. Final thing I think I'll say about this is just, like this is where you would have seen it on the last podcast. So I think it's only been a couple of weeks since then. So bulkier yarn, worsted to Aran weight yarn with size US 10 needles. You get this nice open gauge, but it also just knits up so quickly. And because I'm working on the Maple Meadow, which is so slow, it's really nice to have something that, I'm getting a garment out of so quickly, and it's just like such a joy to knit. So really, really happy with this project, and I can definitely see myself casting on another Felix cardigan in the future because it's just been such a joy. Okay, last but not least is my new little cast on. I have been a big fan of Emma's podcast, the Woolly Mammoth Fiber podcast, I think is what she calls it. She's also a natural yarn dyer, and I just think, she's just so lovely, and her podcast is so lovely. I've been following her for quite a few years, and it seems like she's kind of on this kick with knitting mini scarves and Sophie scarves, like many of us are, but with Jamieson and Smith Shetland, the 2-ply jumper weight in particular. And I just thought that was funny because that before I knew she was doing that, I had cast on a Sophie scarf with Jamieson and Smith, and that was the heathered brown Sophie scarf that I showed you in the last episode. And I remember thinking, like, is this kind of crazy? Like, I haven't seen anybody casting on a Sophie scarf with this yarn, but I have quite a few like leftover balls of Jamieson and Smith in like an array of different colors, and I was like, well, I'll give it a try, because if it works out, the color range, the options you get from Jamieson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight is seemingly endless, in part because it's intended for like color work garments. So I just like the idea of kind of having, what if I could have multiple different mini scarves in the Jamieson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight, just because I love so many of their colorways. And I was pleasantly surprised that I loved it, and then saw Emma doing the same thing with the same yarn. So then I was kind of like, I felt validated in my yarn choice, and then decided, once I cast off my hand spun cowl recently, that I was going to cast on another Sophie scarf, and this time in more stash yarn, Jamieson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight. This one is they don't have names, I don't think, for their colorways. It's just the 14 mix. So 14 mix, but again, this like really beautiful heathered purple, but there's a ton of like blue heathering in there, as well as like a touch of like a warmer burgundy heathered throughout. And I just think it's a beautiful purple, and I thought it would be a good one to add to the next mini scarf addition to my wardrobe for the fall. So that's what I cast on, and I also have it in the smaller little project bag that Dan got me for my birthday years ago from the same company or maker, Danica Studio. So that's where Sophie Scarf is living right now. And this time around, I am knitting it with the proper needle size. I didn't for the first one, and that's a long story I won't get into, but I am much preferring the gauge on this one. It's much more open. The first one I knit was a lot more dense, which turned out great in terms of like warmth, but it'll be nice to have one with the more open drapey gauge this time around. So yeah, I'm really enjoying how this is knitting up so far. And this is one that I always like to have like a travel friendly project on the needles, like car knitting. I could take it to my son's swimming lessons while I'm watching him splash around, and just be knitting on something simple and something that's just easy to take around with me. So this is my travel project. Okay, before we talk about the giveaway, and I thought we could just chat a little bit about acquisitions and plans and my new endeavor into the natural dyeing world. So yeah, let's get started with that. I am in the process of kind of setting up a little mini natural dye studio on our back porch. It is nothing fancy. My plan for it is to actually set up a slow cooker, which I'm still searching for, but I have found a few different options that have a like precision temperature setting, because I'd like to try that method out for dyeing yarn. It's a way to, you kind of can let your natural dyes and your yarns sitting in the dye bath. You can let them simmer or be like just below a simmer for a while with a slow cooker, without it needing to be like heavily supervised, from what I've read and researched, which sounded to me like the perfect way for me to venture into this, because I don't have a lot of time right now, and I don't like the thought of having to like babysit a pot of yarn in a dye bath. I just wanted that part of it to be a little bit more hands-off and mindless, and so my plan is to like set up a little station outside with where I can have a slow cooker going with the dye bath and the yarn, and a like option like that for also mordanting the yarn, and which you can also do with a slow cooker. So that's something that it's one of the final pieces I'm hunting for. I did a bunch of thrifting for the different kinds of kitchen items that I'll need for a little natural dye setup, and most importantly, I did a ton of research. I know there are many, many ways you can get into natural dyeing. And the kind of key thing that I want to figure out over time is how to forage for natural dye stuffs within my local radius. But that also takes a lot of time and research and just like getting to know the different natural dye sources that are local to you, not only knowing what they are in general, but finding them out there. So it's been kind of fun because now when I'm outside walking around the neighborhood, or if we go for a picnic to somewhere like the Arboretum, which is a big, beautiful area of land that's right in the city of Ottawa, and has kind of every kind of tree you could think of for this area. And anyway, so every time we've been out and about, or I'm out for my morning walks, I've found that now I'm constantly looking up to, see if I can find a black walnut tree, because black walnut husks produce a really wonderful light fast and color fast dye, meaning that they won't fade easily over time with frequent washing or in the sunlight. And so those are the kinds of natural dye sources that have become traditional and really well known over time. You can naturally dye things with a lot of other sources that are less color fast and less light fast. You just have to know that the colors may not last or be as vibrant for as long. So anyway, all that to say, I have started this adventure of foraging for natural dyes, but it takes time. It's a slow process, and I wanted to be able to kind of dip my toes into learning the actual dye process while I'm trying to figure out foraging for the dye stuffs, and also hopefully growing some of it myself, which is a whole other part of the adventure I won't get into. And it's not as easy as you'd think if you're looking at specifically at natural dye sources that are color fast and light fast. So long story short, I ended up looking at a Canadian company called Maiwa. I think that's how you pronounce it. I hope I'm not pronouncing it wrong. This is one of their guides that you can get for free online. And this is how it's spelt. M-A-I-W-A, Maiwa. They do a lot in terms of like the whole world of natural dyes. They're based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, I do believe. I hope I'm not wrong about that. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But they have a studio where they not only do natural dye workshops, but they also have a shop where they sell naturally dyed goods, and they sell natural dye stuffs and natural dye extracts, and essentially every other kind of ingredient you would ever need for natural dyeing. So I decided to go this route of purchasing some natural dye, and decided on going the natural dye extract route just to begin with, because it it simplifies a lot of steps at first, and I just kind of wanted to get into the whole process of like learning how to mordant yarn and then dye the yarn in a dye bath and all the different steps involved. And this is kind of was the simplest way that I felt would work for me to get started. So I did purchase a few different dye extracts from them. This is their Weld extract. Weld produces, depending on a variety of different factors, yellows and greens, and you can, I think to get the green you have to modify it. There's a whole process to that, but I think it's, this is going to give you yellows and greens primarily. And it's known for being really color fast and light fast, which is why it's one of those traditional natural dye sources. Madder extract, another very traditional, well-known and loved source of natural dye that produces anything from like browns to burgundies to, you can even get coppery tones with it, depending on how you modify the dye or the yarn. And also if you're over dyeing, you can get, the thing with natural dye is you can dye yarn with one natural dye stuff or source in that dye bath, and then you can dye the yarn again in a different dye bath with a different source and get a completely different color. So trying to think of, like, one example would be, I believe, now I'm still just learning about this, so don't quote me on anything here, but indigo, which I've also purchased. This is a whole other process. I have to create a fructose indigo vat in order to dye with indigo, and that's a different process from all of the other types of natural dye sources. But anyway, long story short, if you dye something to get a red out of the madder, and then you over dye it, or vice versa with indigo, you're going to get into a range of purples and kind of plummier shades. So that's like one example, and I think that it's also a very traditional way to get more of a purple burgundy is to use madder and indigo, because again, indigo is known to be a natural dye source that's quite color fast and light fast, and that's why a lot of these natural dyes become so well known and popular over time. And then the last one that I purchased, they didn't have the extract for this, so I went with their ground walnut husks. Again, like I was sharing with you earlier, walnut husks they produce a natural brown dye and are quite color fast and light fast. So I decided to get this. It's also popular in terms of an option to over dye other colors to kind of turn them from brighter shades to I guess warmer, muddier shades of reds and yellows and greens and blues. So I thought that would be fun to try out, and I also just love brown. You gotta have some basic, some neutrals in there too. And then, like I said, there are ways to modify dye baths to change the colors as well. So if you dyed something with madder, for example, and it was a red, like a shade of red, it would be brighter to begin with, and then if you put it for a brief period of time in an iron bath, it modifies that red and saddens the color is what they call it. It kind of like tones it down. And so you can do that with, iron baths or copper even, which from what I understand, I think copper actually makes the dye a brighter shade in most cases. And so those are ways to like modify the natural colors as well. So those are the dyes that I picked up. And then of course I had to get some yarn to dye. What I wanted to do was to look at Canadian wool mills to see if I could source some undyed Canadian yarn. I really want to support the Canadian sheep and wool and yarn industry, and so I have become familiar now with a lot of the different mills that are based in Canada, but I did end up in the end, for this round anyway, going with one of my longtime favorite wool mills, which is Briggs & Little. And so I got their soft spun. Their soft spun is, they have a whole line of yarns that are spun up with a much more rustic wool, but their soft spun, I think it says that their soft spun is a 25 micron. So for me, this is very, very much next to skin soft. So I thought this would be a great undyed yarn option to play with. I got 8 skeins. It's a very affordable yarn as well. I got 8 skeins so that I could potentially do a couple of like sweater quantities. And I'm starting to think about plans for projects and how I would like to dye those sweater quantities. So stay tuned for more on that. And then I also wanted to get something in a fingering weight, because this soft spun is it's a 2-ply 100% wool, and it's a worsted weight yarn. So I could very easily see myself like knitting up another like Felix cardigan with this. Another cardigan that I found recently, because I've been looking for a garter stitch cardigan for ages, and I found one called the Pillow cardigan. If I have time, I'll link some of these patterns below. No, I can't, I can make no promises, but the Pillow cardigan, it's spelled P-I-I-L-O. Can't remember the designer's name off the top of my head, but I looked at that garter stitch cardigan and I just thought that's the perfect garter stitch cardigan. I need to knit that eventually. So I might do a Pillow cardigan or something like it. So maybe another Felix and maybe a Pillow. We'll see. We'll see. Those are just like a couple of ideas that I have. I also would really love to get into some color work yokes within the next year or so. So I don't know if I would do that with naturally dyed yarn yet. We'll have to see how my natural dye adventures go. But I certainly have some ideas for color work yokes that I have either been wanting to knit for ages or newer ones that I've seen, newer to me, like the Birkin was one I was looking at. The Radari I know is a very popular color work sweater pattern. I would love to knit a Radari. That's one I've been thinking about for a while. And the other really cool option I just discovered was Tin Can Knit's Strange Brew sweater recipe. It's really, I haven't purchased it, at least not yet, but by the sounds of things, it's a way to, they basically give you a recipe to knit a sweater, a colorwork sweater, but you get to kind of select from around 100 different motifs and design your own colorwork yoke. I thought that would be so much fun, first of all, and also such a versatile recipe or pattern to purchase. I also would love to come up with like a Christmassy colorwork yoke eventually. So something like that would give me the flexibility to just kind of, have a range of different colorwork sweater options. So it's just another thing I've been thinking about. Anyway, I digress. The last thing I wanted to show you was this other Briggs & Little yarn that I got to play around with natural dyeing. This is their sport weight 1-ply, and this is out of their more rustic yarn. They do have a sport weight 1-ply, I believe it's called the Tuffy, and it has some nylon in it and would be really great for socks. I went with in terms of like the durability, I went with their 100% wool sport weight, and I might try it for socks because it is still a more rustic yarn, and if I knit with it on a tight gauge, which I always do for my socks, I knit on size 0 needles. I like the gauge to be really tight. I'm considering trying that and seeing how this will fare. However, I have my doubts because it is a 1-ply, which it is like a single ply yarn, so I'm not sure that it will hold up as well as something with 3 or at least 2 plies. So I'm kind of undecided. I know I'm going to naturally dye them, but I just don't know quite what I'm dyeing them for yet. So I've got to give that some more thought. And then I also got their natural sheep gray base, which is another fun thing to play with natural dyeing, is if you have different a different base like this, your natural dye is going to show up in a different way. So this will probably give me some dustier, maybe murkier colors, which I personally would love. So I wanted to give that a shot. So the other thing that I just have to say about this, when it came out of the box, I smelled it, obviously, as one should with new yarn. When I smell this is the soft spun. I can't really smell a whole lot, but this one, and this one to a degree, but this one even more, has like the loveliest sheepy smell. I'm obsessed. Like, I don't even want to wash it because it's just so sheepy. And the neat thing was that when I took a sniff of the skein, it brought me right back to my childhood. I don't know what, like, it's almost the exact sheepy smell that I remember when I was growing up on the merino sheep farm that my parents co-owned with a good friend on Prince Edward Island. So it wasn't for my whole childhood, but there was a solid block of time growing up where I got to spend my days on a farm with merino sheep, and I just absolutely loved it. And I remember so vividly the smell of sheep and this skein in particular. For whatever reason, this one's like bringing me back to my childhood days on that farm with the sheeps and the ducks and the chickens. So I just thought I would share that little moment that I had with the skein of yarn. But there you go. I'll try to give you a bit of a closer look at that. I'm starting to lose the light a bit here, so I don't know how well it will show up. But that's the gray, and this is the natural white. And then this is the soft spun 2-ply. So I think I will leave it at that for today's podcast, and wanted to announce a little welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel giveaway. I was thinking that the easiest way to do this first giveaway, and I do have more planned coming up, hopefully with some naturally dyed yarn, which I would love to give away if possible. Anyway, that's down the road, but hopefully not too far away. But for today, I thought I would love to give away a pattern of your choosing. I think the only criteria will be to just make sure you are a subscriber on the channel, and then I would like to see a comment from you down below, because I would love to get to know you more and engage with you on this channel over time. And so if you could leave a comment down below and just make sure you're subscribed, and then I'll just randomly use a random generator to select one of you from the comment section as a winner for this giveaway. And I'll announce the winner on the next podcast episode. So anyway, stay tuned. I have lots of plans, and ultimately I'm just happy to be back, enjoying just connecting with you on this channel again. And I hope you stay well. Until next time, bye for now.